If you love wisdom, put your mind up to the ceiling. Don't let it stay in the gutter. Don't let your heart get all cluttered. No, I did not stutter. Listen to all that I've muttered. Your life will only go well if you win wisdom or lovers.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside. Come inside.
The truth will surely rescue you and I.
You and I. You and I.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside. Come inside.
The truth will surely rescue you and I.
Hey, what's going on? And a very happy afternoon to you. This is JC Johnson, and you're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the wisdom of purity. All right, so last time we talked about priority. This time we're talking about purity, and I think that you're really going to enjoy this and appreciate it. So we're going to listen to a couple of songs and hear a couple commercials, but don't worry, because we're going to be right back after this.
If you're in love with wisdom, come inside.
Come inside.
Hey, what's going on, Wisdom family? Each week on For the Love of Wisdom, we promote a new and free audiobook that we believe you will benefit from and become wiser by listening to. On today's show, we're talking about the wisdom of purity. And so, the recommended book for this week is Cherished: Shattered Innocence, Restored Hope by Polly Wright. This book is the true story of a former stripper who used to take her clothes off for money, but now uses her influence to speak to other women who are lost in the sexual industry by challenging and encouraging them to become free and know their true identity and value. To download this free book today, just visit audibletrial.com/lovewisdom. Audible is spelled AUDIBLE, so that's audibletrial.com/lovewisdom.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And you know you're listening on northcoastunderground.com, where the underground starts with you. All right, and this week we are talking about the wisdom of purity. Okay, so last week we were joined by special guest Nicole, aka Nick For Real. We were glad that she was able to hang out with us, and we talked about priority. We talked about how this has to do with something being first, either in order or in rank of importance. And we discussed how you juggle things like having children, being in a relationship versus, accomplishing your career goals, and basically making sure that you don't get these things out of order, but that you have everything placed in the right category and that they happen in the right time. So if you missed those episodes, don't worry about it, because they're available for free download either on iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Google Play Music. And you can also hear it on iHeartRadio as well on the app. So you can download that, or you can just stream it on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You can also listen on any Alexa device by saying, "Alexa, play For the Love of Wisdom." So go online today and look it up. And also, if you want to join today's conversation or you want to contribute to previous conversations, you can just hit me up on Twitter at LoveWisePodcast. And in your response, just use the hashtag For the Love of Wisdom, and you can use the hashtag NCU Radio or North Coast Underground as well. So today we're discussing the wisdom of purity, and you definitely don't want to miss this. Purity plays a major role in every society. So for example, in America, you just look at the symbolism of the American flag. Each color stands for something. Red stands for blood, blue stands for honor, and white stands for purity. Okay, and that's what we're talking about today. So what does purity mean? According to the online etymology dictionary, the word purity has Old French and medieval Latin roots. So literally the word means, from Old French, purette, which is simple truth. Okay, and from the Latin word puritas, it means cleanness or pureness. Okay, also clean, pure, unmixed, chaste, undefiled. All right, so those are important words. They're gonna circle back around in a few minutes, but just keep those in mind. Here's some examples of the word pure used in a sentence, and these are provided by manythings.org. Okay, so when you use the word pure, you may typically say something like, the water is pure, right? Meaning that there's nothing in it. Or you can say, she has a pure heart. Means she has good motives. You could say, her wedding ring is made of pure gold, right? So it means it's not mixed with anything. Or you can say, Tom drinks 100% pure orange juice every morning. So if you're drinking pure orange juice, then hopefully you're not getting a whole bunch of preservatives and other stuff, although sometimes that stuff still is in there, even if they do say 100%, but that's a whole nother thing. All right, here's another one. The dress is pure silk, meaning that it's all silk and it's not mixed with stuff, right? So essentially, the word purity has to do with something that is in its rawest or undiluted form. So a cup of water with nothing else in it is pure, but a cup of water mixed with a scoop of powdered iced tea mix is no longer pure. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. Me personally, I like iced tea, but I can't say that it's pure water anymore. I have to say it has now become a different substance. It has now become iced tea. So in other words, the water has become compromised. If you say more figuratively that a person has a pure heart, then what you're saying there is that not a lot of ill feelings or baggage that negatively impacts their words or actions is in there, right? It means that when we say that someone has a pure heart, we're basically saying that they are a good person. That's usually what we would say. When we say that a piece of jewelry is made out of pure gold, we're saying that no other types of materials are mixed with it. And Cascade Coil, actually, CascadeCoil.com has some interesting information about gold and how gold is when it's mixed with other elements. It says, to get a silver-like color, pure yellow gold is mixed with cool-toned metals such as nickel, palladium, zinc, or rhodium. So rose gold, a popular color for a lot of cell phones, rose gold is an alloy of gold and copper, and so it has a pinkish hue, right? So it's no longer purely yellow gold. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with it, but at the same time it means that it has now changed into something else. It is different. We can no longer say it is pure yellow gold because now it's rose gold or a different type of gold. So one thing here also is when we speak about jewelry, we think about impurities, right? Because the more expensive a piece of jewelry is, the least amount of impurities it has. So if we look at the word impurity, all right, here are some examples of synonyms of that word, because we're talking about purity. So let's now look at what is not purity. So we got contamination, infection, grime, pollution, scum, adulteration, corruption, defilement, dirt, filth, pestilence, poisoning, stain, taint, uncleanness, or foreign matter, right? It's a lot of filthy, nasty type of words right there. And so the word pure literally means undefiled. So it means not like any of those other things that I had just mentioned. Contamination, infection, pollution, adulteration, corruption. So purity has none of those elements in it. Here's something crazy that I think you're going to find interesting. Something recently happened, and I think this will help us understand the word undefiled. All right, here's the headline. It says, OMG, 63-year-old mysteriously gets pregnant in her mouth after eating sperm and raw calamari. That's pretty disgusting. It says doctors found 12 bugs embedded in her tongue. That's crazy. How did that happen? And what does that have to do with what we're talking about? All right, check this out. Medical science has disclosed a case of a very strange and shocking pregnancy. So researchers have shown that this 63-year-old woman's mouth, this woman who's from South Korea, her mouth became pregnant because she had eaten an undefiled squid, or Basically, before she ate this raw squid, the internal organs were not removed. And guess what? That means that her squid was undefiled. It was pure. So doctors on observation were shocked to find 12 small white spindle-shaped bug-like sperm bags embedded in her tongue and gums. And according to the journal report, she had not removed the internal organs, but they had just parboiled it before consumption. So that is an example of purity in its rawest form. Raw squid, okay? Now, this is not the kind of purity that we want. I mean, unless you do. I don't know about you, but all I know is I don't want that to happen to me. So hopefully everything will turn out fine with her. I know she rushed to the doctor. I'm sure they took care of her. But yeah, when we talk about purity, we're talking about something that has not been tampered with. Something that is in its straight up, raw, and uncut form. And so what we're talking about today is how this is what we want to get back to. We want to get back to making sure that our minds, our hearts, our bodies, everything, that we're doing things in as pure a fashion as possible. And we're going to listen to a song, but before we do that, just to let you know what's coming up, we're going to be talking about mental and intellectual purity. We're also going to be talking about sexual purity. Then we're going to discuss nutritional purity. Okay, and all these things are very important and really help to break down what we're talking about today. So you're listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. All right, here is Next of Kin.
Hey, what's up? It's your girl Queen Z from the Queen Z Show, and you are listening to For the Love of Wisdom.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome back. This is JC Johnson on For the Love of Wisdom, and we are on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. All right, so before the break, we were talking about the interesting story about this woman who actually got pregnant in her mouth after eating some raw calamari. Now, that's one of the craziest things I've heard all day, right? And I'm sure it is for you too. So we were talking about how this relates to purity because this squid was raw, right? That means that this squid or this calamari was in its purest form. It was in its rawest form. It was undefiled. And that's what we're talking about today. We are talking about purity. All right. And there are different kinds of purity. There's so many different kinds. We don't have time to get into all of them today, but I did pick out at least 4 that I think are important. So let's check these ones out. All right, the first is mental purity. So we're going to talk about mental and intellectual purity. So here's something from the Bible. Here's a verse that I think really applies to this. It's from Philippians 4:8, and it says, "Finally, my brothers and sisters, always think about what is true. Think about what is noble, right, and pure. Think about what is lovely and worthy of respect. If anything is excellent or worthy of praise, think about those kinds of things." All right, so what this says to us is that what we allow into our hearts and our minds ultimately is going to impact our mental purity. And why is that? Well, look at this. This is saying to think about what is noble, think about what is right, think about what is pure, think about what is lovely and what is worthy of respect. And why is that? Well, because if you dwell on things that are negative, then you're going to start to feel and act negative too, right? And so that's why this is saying to do the opposite and think about things that are good, think about things that are pure. And, if you don't have a correct view of yourself and other people, then, this distorted view of yourself and others is greatly going to detract from the quality of your life, right? So if you see somebody and the first thing you think about is something negative, right, then you're never going to be able to truly connect with that person. Maybe this is somebody that has done something to hurt you in the past, and maybe they've apologized to you, but it's been years, and every time you see this person, your blood boils. You start thinking about all of these impure thoughts. You think of all these negative thoughts. You think about how much you want to get even with them, or how much you wish that they would get hit by a bus, right? But instead of thinking like that, we can start thinking about, you know what, I hope that this person has a good day. I hope that, regardless of what happened between me and that person, that ultimately they find fulfillment in their life, and that whatever they did to hurt me, they're not going to do to other people, or that, hopefully that won't happen to them either. Because sometimes we do feel like, hey, if this happened to me, I want it to happen to that person, just so they know how it feels. But that's not always necessary. Sometimes killing them with kindness or with grace is actually better. Now, that's easier said than done. And so, that's why we have to, trust God for that, because that can be difficult. But anyway, that relates to purity in our mind. It's really important that we have some control over that. All right, so here's another one. When it comes to mental and intellectual purity, you have to ask yourself, what lies have you believed that make your thoughts impure? Maybe it's something about yourself. Maybe you feel like, I'm never going to be successful in life. Or, I didn't do very well in high school, so I don't believe that I would be able to do well in college. So there's no point in me even going. Right? But that's a negative perception of yourself, and that can really affect your life. And you don't want it to do that. You have to say, well, just because something did happen to me in the past that showed that maybe I wasn't too good at school, it doesn't mean that I won't be good at school in the future. And possibly there could be an alternative for you. Maybe you won't go to, Harvard or Princeton or somewhere like that. Maybe you won't even go to a community college. Maybe you would do better somewhere like a trade school, somewhere that, is going to allow you to really focus on what you're passionate about, more so than just, taking classes that you're not going to use. Right? So because unless you're planning on becoming a mathematician, maybe you don't need advanced calculus and trigonometry and algebra and geometry and all that. Maybe you just need something simple. Maybe, something that's more in line with what you're passionate about. Because if you were to have something like that, if you were to be able to be in a school like that, I guarantee you would enjoy it, and you would probably be at the top of your class. So that's just something to think about, right? Things always start in the mind. And so if we want to have a good life, we have to have good thoughts. And that's why I love this verse when it tells us to think about what is noble, to think about what is right, to think about what is pure, to think about what is lovely and worthy of respect. Those are the only things that are really worth dwelling on. Okay? So, the next thing before we get into this next thing, since we're on the topic of mental purity, I do want to bring up something that, it might be a kind of touchy subject for some people. And if you have, young people around you, you may want to cover their ears for a second. But I think that this is important to talk about. Right? Now, when it comes to your mind, right, there is something that has a great impact on the mind. Okay? And this thing is called pornography. Now, here's a quote from an article online. It's called 9 Things You Should Know About Pornography and the Brain. Because since we're talking about mental purity, I think it's important that we look at the way that different things can affect our mind. All right, so here it says, in men, there are 5 primary chemicals involved in arousal and response. And this is not just for men, this is for women as well, but that's what this says here. All right, so it says the one that likely plays the most significant role in pornography addiction is dopamine. Dopamine plays a major role in the brain system that is responsible for reward-driven learning. Every type of reward that has been studied increases the level of dopamine transmission in the brain, and a variety of addictive drugs, including stimulants such as cocaine, amphetamine, and methamphetamine, how they act directly on the dopamine system. Okay, so this all talks about how something that you put into your body, such as a drug like cocaine or methamphetamines, or even something that you view that comes into your mind through your eyes, such as pornography. It talks about how it can have an impact on you because it makes you start to view things differently. It makes you start to view maybe women differently. It makes you start to view sex differently. It makes you start to view yourself differently. And there's all types of problems that come with this. You know, some people even have problems with having sex. They're not able to because their mind is so focused on something else. And this can definitely affect your mental purity, your ability to process information correctly, and to even see yourself and other people correctly. So this is a big one. That's why I bring it up. And of course, you know, it's not to offend. You know, if this is what you're into, or, you know, you don't think that it's a problem for you, I understand that. But I do think it is something to look at if you are having any kind of issues in this area when it comes to your performance, you know, maybe with your spouse or whatever. Maybe it's, you know, just something to look at, because this definitely does have an impact psychologically. All right, so we're going to look at a couple other things, but right now we're going to play some music for you. When we come back, we're going to continue discussing the different forms of purity. And you are listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. We'll be right back.
The underground starts with you.
Hey everybody, you're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets.
With your host, Jason Johnson.
All right, what's going on? This is JC Johnson. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And we are live on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. All right, so today we're talking about the wisdom of purity. And if you missed it before the break, we were talking about the different kinds of purity. We were talking about mental and intellectual purity before the break, and some of the effects that different things have on the brain. And right now we're going to look at sexual purity, and we're going to look at what that means. This is something that is kind of antiquated. For some, they may feel like it's irrelevant in 2018, but with all that we have going on, I think that it's very relevant. So let's just take a look at some of the benefits to maintaining purity when it comes to your, you know, the expression of your physical body, or that is when it comes to sex. There's an author, and also she's a radio personality. Her name is June Hunt, and she provides some pretty awesome insight in her book, Sexual Integrity. And what she brought up, this is something that I thought was really cool. She talked about the 7 myths about sex. All right, so here's what she had to say. She said, all right, myth number 1, all is fair in love and war. All right, I'm sure that you've heard that one so many times. I've heard that a lot too. It's something that is a pretty popular expression in our culture, or at least it used to be, right? All is fair in love and war, meaning that, hey, you know what? Whatever I have to do in order to get what I want, if I love someone or I love something, I should be able to do whatever I want to get it, right? Okay, but she's saying that that's a myth, right? So what's the truth then, if that's a myth? Well, according to June Hunt, she says the basis of love is sacrifice, not fairness. That's something to meditate on right there. So it's not about it, you know, whatever is fair. It's fair if it's, you know, having to do with love and war. But no, this says love has to do with sacrifice. It's not about fairness. Food for thought. All right, so here's another one. Myth number 2. If it feels good, it must be good. Now, that one is tough because, hey, I mean, usually if something feels good, then yeah, you do say, yeah, I mean, hey, it is good. I mean, why wouldn't it be, right? What's wrong with it? If it feels good, it has to be good. But she goes to say that here's the truth. Sin can feel good, but that doesn't mean sin is good, right? And I guess, you know, that's pretty true. Maybe you're playing the guitar and you say, you know, you like to hold a guitar pick in your hand, but it doesn't mean a guitar pick would be good if you were to swallow it. Some people do swallow things like that, but, you know, I'm sure that it can't be great for your body. So what she's saying here is that just because something feels good doesn't mean that it is good. Something to think about. All right, here's myth number 3. I need sex in order to feel good about myself. Right now, this is a big one. A lot of people do feel this way, and people go through stuff in their life. Sometimes they mean well, and they want something good. They want love with somebody, and they want a lot of good things, but maybe they go about it the wrong way. I know that I've definitely been there in my life. I have at times looked for sex to meet a need that it really wasn't able to meet, but it's just a way of self-medicating, I guess. And a lot of people do that. But here's the truth. Real love is not self-seeking. All right. And she uses 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. If you're familiar with the Bible at all, 1 Corinthians 13 is oftentimes called the love chapter. All right. And here's what it says in 1 Corinthians 13:5. It says, love is not rude. It is not self-seeking. So really, when you love another person, you're thinking about what is best for that person. And in the heat of the moment, when passions are high and all that, you may not be thinking about what's best for somebody else. You're just thinking about, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm good. I'm trying to get something out of this moment. Right? But this is saying here that we really need to, in order to truly love somebody, we can't be rude, and we can't just be looking to satisfy ourselves. We have to also think about what's best for that other person. All right. And then myth number 4. She says, a husband prefers his wife to be sexually experienced. Now, in our culture today, I don't know anybody. Well, I can't say I don't know anyone, but I do know a couple people who waited until they got married to have sex, but most people I know didn't. And so one of the myths here, it says that a husband prefers his wife to be sexually experienced. But that's not always the case. If you were to ask the average guy, he may not think that it's possible for his wife to be unexperienced, but if they were to be honest, they would probably, be glad to know that they're the only person that their wife has ever been with. So here's the truth when it comes to that. It says, sex outside of marriage can breed jealousy and distrust in a marriage, right? And here's a quote from Proverbs chapter 6, verse 34, especially as it relates to those, people who are into cheating. It says, jealousy arouses a husband's fury, and he will show no mercy when he takes revenge. That is the type of person you do not want to come across on a bad day. You do not want to come across a jealous husband, or a jealous wife for that matter. Not a good situation. It's best to stay out of those kind of situations, right? That's just truth from Proverbs right here. That's something that we all need to take heed to. All right, here's myth number 5. As long as I'm not married, I should be able to have sex with whomever I want. And now, this is common thought, and if this is what you believe, of course, no shade towards you, but on this show, I just want us to discuss different ideas. I want us to be challenged, right? If I believe something that's false, I want somebody to be able to challenge me, because I don't want to keep believing something that's false. So if you got some information that you think is going to help me, that's going to help me grow as a person, that's going to help me make wiser decisions, I want you to share that with me. And so the only reason I'm sharing any of this is because I think it's helpful. But again, if you got a difference of opinion, definitely hit me up on Twitter at LoveWise Podcast, and we can talk about it. But so the myth number 5, it says, as long as I'm not married, I should be able to have sex with whomever I want. But here is, according to June Hunt, here is the truthful statement. The only instance where God blesses two people in a sexual relationship is within a husband and wife marital relationship, right? And I can say that from experience, I do know from being on both sides of it, that there is nothing like having that kind of, comfort that comes from knowing that you and your spouse are together. You don't have any other people that are involved in the situation, and that helps with trust. That helps with knowing that you're not going to be contracting any sexual transmitted diseases, things like that. I mean, there's so much that can come out of it. And in 2018, you never know who you're dealing with. So just because someone has a cute smile, or because they got nice clothes, or they got some new Jordans, or, you know, whatever the case, it doesn't mean that they're clean. So one thing to keep in mind is, you know, we gotta be mindful of the people that we deal with, and we're less likely to come across bad situations if, you know, things are done within a marriage relationship. And that's just real. Disagree if you want, but you cannot disagree with the outcome of going against that. We see it every day. There's a lot of tragic things that happen with people contracting all types of stuff, right? So that's just that, something to think about. Myth number 7 here. She said, multiple sex partners gives me more experience. Now, yeah, that may give you some experience, right? But one thing that she says here, the truth to that is multiple experiences breed comparisons and dissatisfaction. And that is very true, right? Because when you finally do get married, or you decide to settle down with someone, you don't want thoughts of all the other people that you used to be with, or the people that your partner used to be with. That just causes problems. But more on that after this. You're listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you.
You're now listening to For the Love of Wisdom on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with who? No other but you.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets, and we are live on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. This is your host, JC Johnson, and before the break, we were discussing the wisdom of purity. That's the topic of today's show, and we're going to be on for 2 hours today discussing this. And before we went to the break, we talked about purity as it relates to your mind, mental purity, intellectual purity. And then we also talked about sexual purity, and we discussed some of the myths about that and some of the truths surrounding that. And if you missed that, don't worry about it, because you can always listen to past episodes. You can go to iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Google Play Music, and now you can also listen to For the Love of Wisdom on iHeartRadio. You just have to go and look that up, either in your web browser or download the app. So right now, we're going to look at, since we looked at mental and intellectual purity and sexual purity, now we're going to look at nutritional purity. Okay, so what you choose to feed your body is very important. And I'm sure that if you are at all health conscious, then you're aware of that, and maybe not. And if not, that's okay, because that's what we're going to talk about now, so that we can get some more education on that. In our society, processed foods and drinks are oftentimes easier to find than fresh, organic, and undefiled, right? Or pure foods. Okay. And I know that because I'm always on the go. And sometimes I wish, like, man, that would be awesome if there was like a fast food, health food type of place, right? And, you know, because you don't always have time to stop into somewhere like Whole Foods or, you know, anywhere that sells fresh products. So oftentimes you're stuck. You're like, okay, well, I guess I gotta, you know, go to one of these fast food restaurants out here, even if it's not the best thing for me. And sometimes they do provide some alternatives. They do give you some options, but there's nothing like having something fresh, organic, something that you know is good for you. But I would challenge you, just like I'm trying to do. I have been, you know, really just trying to eat less fast food and take, you know, get some, you know, bring some more stuff from home. That's really the best way to do it. You save a lot of money by doing that, and you also are able to eat healthier. So what we're going to look at is the effects that food have on the brain. Okay, because since we are talking about purity, I think that this is really important to see how different foods can affect the purity of our mind and the purity of our body as well. So here are the top 3 food choices. This is from an article called The 30 Best and Worst Foods for Your Brain. Okay, so we're gonna first take a look at the top 3. Number 1 is chamomile tea. I thought that was interesting. I wasn't expecting that to be number 1, although chamomile tea I do know is good for you. But this says this is the best thing for your brain. Research shows that chamomile tea not only brings on better sleep, but it also improves your cognitive functioning during your waking hours also. So, hey, you may not be a big tea drinker, but if you are, I would definitely think about start using chamomile tea, maybe instead of some of the other tea choices that there are. And if you don't like tea, it might be something that you want to get into. If you're like me, I prefer coffee over tea. I always have. And there's nothing wrong with drinking that in moderation, but to get the true health benefits that you might be looking for, chamomile tea is probably the best way to go. All right, here is number 2 on the list, the second best food for your brain. They suggest black beans. All right, black beans. This is something that if you like going to Chipotle, this is something that you can definitely get from there. Now, me personally, every time I go to Chipotle, I typically get the pinto beans, right? I just think they taste better. But as far as getting the health benefits, it might be time to switch it up a little bit, incorporate some black beans, right? Because scientists have found that magnesium, at least in animal studies, can help reverse some of the detrimental effects of Alzheimer's disease for mice. And as the old rhyme says, beans are also good for your heart. A healthier blood flow means a healthier brain. And there's also another rhyme. It says, beans, the magical fruit, the more you eat. Well, you know the rest, right? But black beans are definitely really good for you. So this can be good for your brain, and I'm sure that it has plenty of good health benefits for your body as well. But when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, I mean, this is something that's crucial, right? If this is saying that it was able to reverse Alzheimer's disease in mice, then I'm pretty sure that it could be something good for human beings as well. All right, and here's the third best food for your brain. All right, so according to eatthis.com, they say that whole eggs. Now, this is really just for those who don't have high cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, you probably don't want to eat a whole egg. You may want to just eat an egg white. But if cholesterol is not a problem for you, eating the yolk of an egg, eating the whole egg can be really helpful. It says older people who suffer from vitamin D deficiency show faster rates of cognitive decline. 3 large eggs, what you'd use to make a morning omelet, will provide 33% of the day's intake of vitamin D. That's pretty cool. Something to think about. So if you are, looking for something to, add to your morning routine, something good for breakfast, according to this, whole eggs are definitely the way to go. And of course, a disclaimer, that is only if you don't have high cholesterol, because if you do, you probably want to just stick to egg whites, right? So we are getting ready to play some more music and take a little bit of a break, but don't worry, because we're not going anywhere, because we'll be right back after this for hour 2. And you are listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. I'm your host, JC Johnson, and you're listening live on North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. We'll be right back.
Knowledge is power, power is money, and money makes the world go round.
Money, power, respect, I get it. Higher, learning, yeah, I'm winning. Only get better with time, you got on my mind with wisdom. There's no limit, there's no limit. Get up and get it, can achieve the impossible, conquer every obstacle. Exhausting, grinding, constantly pushing, do what they say I could. Life is what you make it. Knowledge is power, don't let them take it.
If you're in love with wisdom,